Welcome, first of all. Good evening, good afternoon. Małgorzata Bonikowska, the Center for International Relations, Poland. Welcome to our online discussion. We do it under the framework of a series of talks we call Asia-Europe Online Bridge. And that's a live discussion where we try to show two perspectives, European and Asian perspectives on the discussed subject. And today, as you can see from the title, we will concentrate on the Indo-Pacific region, especially on the security in this region. And we would like to confront our own European, especially Polish perspective with the Japanese perspective on this issue. And let me welcome, first of all, our key speaker, Mr. Masashi Murano. Good morning, Masashi. You are in Washington right now, correct? Yes. So, yes, Mr. Murano is a Japanese fellow at Hudson Institute, a very prestigious American think tank in Washington, studying security issues, especially his researches on American-Japanese cooperations in defense sector, and also, of course, on Indo-Pacific as a region more and more important for us Europeans. Mr. Murano will present his speech, then we will comment on that. Welcome, Professor Jakub Zajączkowski from our side, our colleague from Warsaw University. Jakub, dzień dobry.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Yes, Professor Zajączkowski is a specialist expert in international relations, head of the chair of regional and global studies at Warsaw University, my dear colleague, and specialist really on Indo-Pacific region. And before we start this discussion, let me, because we do it in cooperation with the Embassy of Japan to Poland, and thanks to the intermediation of the embassy, we have our guest speaker today. Let me welcome His Excellency Ambassador of Japan to Poland, Mr. Akio Miyajima. Good afternoon, sir. And please, the floor is yours, the screen is yours for the welcome note.
Good afternoon and good morning. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. This is my name is Akio Miyajima. I'm a new ambassador to Poland. I came here 7 months ago, but the 6 months lockdown situation. So now just summer has come and I feel a bit liberated, thanks to the vaccination progress. Today that I'm very, very happy to be able to be a part of this online seminar that the featured speaker is Professor Murano at the Hudson Institute of the United States. And thank you really very much for the arrangement and organization by Professor Bonikowska, and also the participation by Professor Zajączkowski, who has a special knowledge about the Indo-Pacific, especially Indian perspective as well. Today, I am personally really interested to learn and listen to what Professor Murano has said, is going to talk to us today in this very volatile and also unpredictable kind of world. That we are, I hope that we can hear that about what we call the kind of the FOIP, the free and open Indo-Pacific, this kind of idea and a concept and a strategy which Japan has been pursuing with a good friend and ally of the United States in order to create the free and open rule-based international order. Japan has been placing special interest in this Central and Eastern European region for the strategic importance. May the 6th and 7th, Foreign Minister Motegi visited Bosnia-Herzegovina as one of the Western Balkan countries, and Slovenia, that the next EU presidency, and Poland here in Warsaw, and then had a bilateral meeting with Poland and also the VPO Czech, Hungary, Slovakia, Slovenia, and then Poland, the kind of the foreign ministers meeting. After when he attended the G7 foreign ministers meeting in UK. And then last week, our foreign minister visited Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania after he attended the G20 foreign ministers meeting in Italy. So this shows that how much importance we attach to this region in this world. And everywhere, there's an agreement that in this volatile world that we need to work together to create, as I said, free and open rule-based international order based upon the rule of law, democracy, and freedom of navigation, and so forth. And then we made a commitment to work together, that including the European friends. And we are really feel encouraged that last April, the EU that announced that the Indo-Pacific kind of strategy, and then it, as an indication that, well, it shows the strong that the intention to engage in Indo-Pacific. And then we understand that in this autumn, EU is going to formulate the joint communications in the Indo-Pacific. So I, as ambassador here in Poland, really expect that the very constructive Poland's the kind of the engagement and then support for this concept and also this process as a leader of the Central and East European country, and also that important ally of the United States. So today, I really do hope that Professor Murano's kind of the presentations and Q&A will deepening understanding of this concept and strategy of the FOIP, free and open Indo-Pacific, and also that assessment about the East Asian maybe security situations. I really do hope there'll be a very active, useful exchange of views after the presentations. And then I do like to conclude my remarks by extending my personal or kind of invitation to the Dr. Murano to come to visit Warsaw to continue that this intellectual dialogue with the people here in Warsaw. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Indeed, we are more and more interested in the situation in the region. And what Ambassador rightly said, the Council conclusions from April this year at the EU level made a strong statement that Europe should be more visible in Indo-Pacific and more active together, and also individual countries at the moment, especially France and Germany, are engaged, but Poland also is very much interested in following the developments in the region. That's why we want to understand more the Japanese colleagues' perspective and also listen to the voices from other countries of the region. We have several embassies today with us, so welcome all. And let us do the following. First, Mr. Murano will speak, then Professor Zajączkowski will comment, and then we'll have an open discussion that everyone will have a chance to put a question or comment what the speakers said. So Masashi, the floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you very much for your kind introduction. And first of all, I would like to thank the Center for International Relations and Dr. Bonikowska and Japanese Embassy for giving me these opportunities. As Ambassador Miyajima mentioned, the importance of the Indo-Pacific region is in the global geopolitics and geoeconomics is growing enormously today. There are many opportunities abound in this rapidly developing region. So these opportunities are not only open, are not only for our physical neighboring countries such as Japan and other countries in Asia, but also open to United States Europe, and other countries. However, in order to access these opportunities and the benefits, the Indo-Pacific region needs to be more than just a geographical space or geographical sphere, which means by that it needs to be a safe space and where free and open the barrier and the principles are maintained. So this means that along with the many opportunities that exist in this region, there are also risks that may cause of those opportunities to be lost. And these risks are not unique to the Indo-Pacific region itself, but have cross-regional impacts or the cross-regional implications. So today, I'd like to talk about the risks and opportunities in the Indo-Pacific from a Japanese perspective. So at the first place, the Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific initiative, or its concept, was the first mentioned by former Prime Minister Abe is in his speech in Kenya in 2016. However, its origins go back to the first term of the Abe administration when he addressed the Parliament of India in 2007. At that time, Prime Minister Abe mentioned the confluence of two seas. Needless to say, the two seas, the two oceans here refers to the one is the Indian Ocean and the other one is the Pacific Ocean. And as shown in the slide, if we look at the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean as one single integrated region, we can see that the region includes the two continents. One is Asia, which is growing rapidly, and another one is Africa, which has a lot of potential. The Indo-Pacific region holds the half of the world's population and is the engine of global economic growth. Historically speaking, this region is familiar to Japan because the route from the Middle East to Indian Ocean, and then the pass through the South China Sea and Taiwan. There has been an important energy supply line since the Cold War. And at the same time, the cooperation and support for ASEAN countries has been an important factor in economic development. And the United States, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean from Japan, has also recognized the importance of the region, and has continued to work closely with Japan. For instance, during the Cold War, United States and Japan have conducted joint studies of the sea lane defense. And also another recent symbolic example, the US Pacific Command was renamed as the US Indo-Pacific Command in 2018. However, the importance of this region is now growing for Europe. For example, 1/3 of world trade and 40% of Europe's foreign trade pass through the South China Sea. I will talk a little bit more about the problem of the instability of the security environment in Asia later. But therefore, if the peace and the stability of the Indo-Pacific region is disturbed, all stakeholders like us will suffer many disadvantages, both politically and economically. And Japan's approaches to the realization of the free and open Indo-Pacific that consists of 3 key components. The first is the promotion of fundamental values and principles, which includes the rule of law and freedom of navigation and the free trade. The second is the pursuit of economic prosperity, including through the improvement of the connectivities. This connectivity includes the physical connectivities through the support for the development of the quality infrastructure development, such as the ports, the railways and roads, energy, and the information and the communication technologies like 5Gs. Also, the people-to-people connectivity through the human resource development, and then the institutional connectivity means the facilitating the custom, among others. And it also includes a strengthening economic partnerships, including the FTAs and FPAs. And third, that is ensuring the peace and stability, which mean the traditional security-related efforts. This includes the capacity building for regional countries, the Coast Guard, and some other law enforcement agencies, and cooperation in the area of humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, the counter-piracy operations, and non-proliferation issues in this region. And also, the Japanese government has also repeatedly stated that this concept, free and open in the Pacific concept, is neither exclusive or opposed to any particular regional concept. However, it is a case of just sharing the values and the principles of the free and open. If there are challenges, some potential challenges who want to make Indo-Pacific a restricted and closed region, we must protect the rule-based security order from the potential threats or potential challenges. Since my specific field is the traditional security issues, I would like to discussing in some more details the security challenges we faced in promoting free and open in the Pacific concept. The security environment in the Indo-Pacific, where the United States with its allies, including Japan, and China encounter each other, is sometimes described as a risky situation that could lead to an arms race. Some people see this problem as a kind of security dilemma or Thucydides trap. However, I think that it is not appropriate to use some discussion of security dilemma to explain the regional security environment in the Pacific. Because of this, that the security dilemma is defined as the spiral model of unexpected arms race that occurs even though no side really desires it. But it is clear that Chinese military expansion and their activities over the past 20 years are not reactions to Japan's defense posture and its strategy. Described this slide, from the late 1990s and to 2012, Japan's defense expenditure wasn't almost flat or even decline. Since 2012, following the inauguration of the second Abe administration, Japan's defense budget has grown. But this growth rate is about just 1% per year. And it is marginal compared to Chinese defense spending growth, which for the fiscal year 2020 increased by 5.2% over the previous year. So now that the Chinese, the the defense spending growth rate is more than double. So as this slide is described. And in addition, before the COVID-19 pandemic, diplomatic relations between Japan and China were on an improving trend, with a state visit by President Xi Jinping scheduled for the spring of 2020. But the Chinese Coast Guard and Chinese Navy vessels have been increasing active in the East China Sea. So in other words, even if the diplomatic relations between Japan and China improve, the Chinese military and the paramilitary activities have becoming more active. This is a fact. Okay, so let's look at the few more specific examples. The first, the size of the Chinese Coast Guard is already more than double that Japanese Coast Guard. The second, some of Chinese Coast Guard vessels have been converted from Chinese Navy frigates. So they are superior to Japanese Coast Guard patrol vessels in terms of firepower and its protection capabilities. The third, as China are doing in the South China Sea, Chinese Coast Guard vessels are chasing Japanese fishing boats around in Japan's territorial water in the East China Sea. And related on these issues, at first, Chinese Coast Guard also sometimes escorts Chinese fishing boats operating illegally in the East China Sea. So this problem is that there may be armed militia mixed in among these fishing boats. I think that this is easy to understand. That if you think of them as a kind of equivalent of Russian special forces known as the Little Green Men that appeared in Crimea in Ukraine. I personally called these people is the Chinese Little Blue Fishermen. In peacetime, we don't know the detail, how closely the Chinese government controls these fishing boats. But I think one can say that these fishing boats are equipped with the GPS-like positioning, satellite positioning systems, receivers, provided by Chinese government. So it is highly possible that the Chinese government will be able to keep them under control if they decided to take any action. So behind these actions are the objective of China to assert its own sovereignty by undermining Japanese administrative control. And these activities are not innocent pursuits as allowed by international law. In addition, the Coast Guard law, which has implemented in this February, that gives the Chinese Coast Guard the authority to deviate from the scope of UNCLOS and sets ambiguous standard for use of force and excessive over maritime claim. So in other words, the Chinese Coast Guard law is one of the clear evidence of China's willingness to use force in order to change the status quo in the East China Sea by the gray zone tactics. Now, I think that you know very well that these illegal means of asserting sovereignty and changing that status quo are not only problem in Asia. Just a few weeks ago, a British Royal Navy destroyer navigating innocently through the Black Sea that received a warning from Russian military and the paramilitary forces. So they not only claimed the illegally occupied the territorial waters surrounding Crimea, but also tried to disrupt the British Navy's innocent passage. And I am not sure that if these actions that were intentionally coordinated, but the Russia's behavior in the maritime domain is beginning to resemble the behavior in Indo-Pacific. So this is not good trend for us. Okay, so please remember what I said earlier. The security dilemma is an unexpected arms escalation spiral model of military expansion. But this unstable situation that we are experiencing in the Pacific region is not unexpected arms race, like a security dilemma. If China's military buildup is not a reaction of the action of US-Japan alliance, no matter how much diplomatic communication improves, there will be a fundamentally competitive relations between US-Japan alliance and China. Yeah, so I would like to add a little bit more, a couple of things. During the peacetime and gray zone, the Japanese Coast Guard and the Japanese self-defense forces must conduct the presence patrol to dynamically deter the Chinese opportunistic creeping expansion. However, when considering seamless escalation control from the low intensity aggression and to high intensity conflicts, the forward presence to address Chinese anti-access area denial threats needed to be deployed by distributed manner. And these competing operational demands, complicate how to combine the best mix of the defense posture and our defense portfolio direction. And the Japanese defense community has been tackled on this issue, this difficult problem of how to figure out the most appropriate solution to this competing demand since around 2010. But to be honest, the complex nature of this problem has not been seriously understood in the West at that time. However, that situation drastically changed after the Crimea crisis in 2014. As we realized that at the time, gray zone or hybrid warfare were not confined to the gray zone or the pre-war level alone. The potential challenges believe they can better compete at the gray zone level by casting conventional shadow or even nuclear shadow. So therefore, our counter-escalation strategy needed to be considered an integrated manner from the gray zone to the conventional and also nuclear level. In addition, the allies needed to discuss in advance various specific operational scenarios and for the policy decision making, such as whether it is better to maintain ambiguity to complicate Chinese calculation, or to draw a clear red line, sending a more clear deterrent signal. So if this trend continues, the Coast Guard will eventually be overwhelmed and saturated by the Chinese Coast Guard. If this happens, Japan may be forced to deploy our maritime self-defense forces first. But even if this situation happened, I hope the international community will understand that Japan has not taken any illegal aggressive actions here. And China is deliberately keeping the confrontation at the gray zone level, because if it gets into a conventional level of conflict with Japan, it will trigger US military intervention under Article 5 of the US-Japan Security Treaty. If if so, that they carefully calculated messaging the risk of potential escalation on a part of US and Japan can be necessary to restrain Chinese gray zone aggression. So for this happened, Japan needs to the international community to support us as one of the status quo, the nations standing together. And lastly, that I believe that those who are involved in the security in Eastern Europe, especially the Poland, you share the difficulty to the issue more than any other in the world. There will be the differences between Europe and where the main battlefield or main theater is the land domain, and the Indo-Pacific, where the main theater is in maritime domain. So in this case, in approaches of the escalation controls and dealing with challenges who try to change the status quo may be different. But in addition, our resources are limited, and it is unlikely that the Polish forces will be deployed to Taiwan Strait or Japanese self-defense forces to dispatching to the Suwałki Gap. But even so, I believe that it is important to compare the similarities and the differences between the challenges we face, and to share our knowledge and lessons learned from help us to deal with the challenges of the future. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much for attention. I'm looking forward to further discussion.
Thank you, Professor Murano. I think it was extremely important, the issue you raised, that being even distant geographically, Europe and our Western alliance in the Pacific region may face very similar threats. And it's very important to exchange the information and also the experience how to handle these situations. As you rightly said, Europe until 2014 was reacting differently, and 2014 was and is still a turning point for us, facing at Russia's very assertive policy in our region. So we understand that, and maybe now to understand it from the Polish perspective, how the European and Polish perspective looks, I would like to ask Jakub Zajączkowski to comment on what we've heard. Jakub, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Małgorzata, for inviting me for this seminar, and it is a great pleasure and honor to comment and to talk about Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much, Professor Murano, for your contribution, and I would like also to express thanks to His Excellency. And in my short comment, I would like to put the stress on several things, because I think it is a consensus among us that this area, the area of Indo-Pacific, has become in the last 5-6 years very, very important area. And if we take into account the evolution of European Union approach towards Indo-Pacific in the last 5-6 years, we could see a huge evolution in the context of perception. The Indo-Pacific is perceived as an area of great importance in IR, and also if we take into account the perception, the European Union perception of for China, also we could see, we are witness of a huge evolution of perception if we compare to the situation which was 10-11 years ago. So awareness among us, especially among decision makers in Europe, in European Union, has been growing. But the question is, what does it mean? What does it mean for Europe? What does it mean for European Union policy in the context of Indo-Pacific. And in this context, I would like to put a stress on a few assumptions, also in the context of Professor Murano paper. So first of all, we need, it is a consensus that this area is very important. It is a place of competition between the United States and China. But I would like to underline one thing. It is still debate. It is still debate how, what kind of term we should use. It is a debate still among, not only among the scholars, but also among politicians, how to describe this area. And still, for example, in New Zealand or in Southeast Asia, they prefer the term Asia Pacific. So the question now also to Professor Murano, because some countries, some experts in New Zealand, in the Pacific, they underline it's much better to use still the term Asia Pacific, not Indo-Pacific, because as I fully agree with you, Indo-Pacific is still it's still more political concept, and the question is about the substance of this concept, and we should also take into account that we have still a discourse among Asian countries in the context of the term. I would like to remind that, for example, Indonesia supports the idea of Indo-Pacific wide friendship and the cooperation treaty. As most Southeast Asian countries are afraid that confrontation between the US and China is a challenge for centrality of ASEAN. So it is the first thing we should take into account. If we go to New Zealand, in New Zealand, most scholars and politicians still use the concept of Asia Pacific. But I could agree that especially in the last 2-3 years, in most documents, not only, of course, not only in the US strategy, but also in documents adopted by India, by Japan, and other countries in the Asian continent, we could find more often the term of Indo-Pacific. But I think the crucial question is, in the context of security, is even if we accept this idea of Indo-Pacific, what does it mean? Do the concept of Indo-Pacific change security architecture? It is also my question to Professor Murano, because if we take into account Indo-Pacific, and it was a lot of discussion for next seminar, maybe we could discuss about the concept of Quad. It is all these concepts are, as I said, without a substance. And if we take into account security architecture in Asia, still the hub and spokes architecture is the most important. Or can we see any change? Still the bilateralism, still bilateral agreements of United States with Japan, with South Korea, also agreement, the new agreements like the cooperation between United States and India are still the most important. So in my opinion, the Quad or another initiative did not and will not replace the old security architecture. So in this context, in this context, the question to Professor Murano is, what do you think? Can we think about new institutional framework changes in the context of security in Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific? Still the biggest challenge in the, and if we compare Europe, because Małgorzata told about Europe, our experience, Europe and Asia, the main difference is that in Asia Pacific, in Indo-Pacific, we don't have still multilateral institutions responsible for security, and it is the main, and I think we should take into account all these things. So still bilateralism, still balance of power is key elements in the context of security in Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific. And also in your presentation, you put one graphs where you take into account, where you took into account changes in expenditure, military expenditure. But I think the crucial thing is not changes in military expenditure, but general military expenditure, military expenditure of two great powers, of two competitors, United States and China. So I think we could agree that two key elements are the most important when we talk about security in Indo-Pacific or Asia Pacific. It is relative distribution of power, and in the last 20 years, this distribution of power, relative distribution of power, has decreased in the context of United States. So United States foreign policy strategies is respond to changing of power distribution in the system, especially in the context of rising China. So it is the first element. And the second element, which we should take into account, is the fact, if you look at the documents, strategy, national strategy adopted by United States, since the end of the Second World War, which area is the crucial for United States? East Asia. East Asia, it is the most important area also for United States, and it is no change since the end of the Second World War, and this area is an area of competition between of course United States and United States and China. And the last but not least, now the question is how states like India, like Japan, like Australia should behave. What is in the interest of European Union members? So I think because of course in the context of Indo-Pacific, India and Australia is interested to promote the idea of Indo-Pacific, because as you told Professor Murano, then in this concept, maritime dimension is much more important than continental dimension. And if we look at the continental dimension of Asia, India or Australia are not important player in the security system. If we take into account Northeast Asia, can we see India? Can we see Australia? They don't play important role. So they're interested to promote the concept which puts stress on maritime dimension. But what is the common thing, I think, for European Union members, and for Japan, Australia, is that they are not interested in the situation where IR in Indo-Pacific will be determined by competition between US and China. And I think for Europe, and if we take into account the conclusion and in the adopted by European Council in the April, it is very clear signal. We would like to go beyond the traditional security. We would like to focus more on soft power elements, because thanks to development of cooperation in this area, we could omit the situation where European Union would be marginalized in Indo-Pacific. So the scenario, it is the scenario where we put stress on soft power, on values, and the norms, will not put stress on typical great power competition, is the best solution for European Union. Such a scenario is the best for European Union, because will help European Union, not only European Union, but I think for most also Asian countries, would avoid being, as I said, marginalized. And the last sentence, Małgorzata, I think the situation, today's situation in Indo-Pacific is the case study which highlights the intersection of great powers like United States, like China, and also the behavior of such partner powers like European Union, which we could describe as more as a civil power, as a normative power. So many things I wanted to underline, but I think we will also have time to develop some issues during the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jakub, for this comments, which shows also well, there are some similarities in the approach, but also some differences as well. Of course, we don't need to mention that European Union is not a state. It's much more than an international organization, but it's still not one state. So the maneuvers at the EU level in foreign and security policies are quite limited, also by the rule that we have to decide everything unanimously. But in the same time, they are important players in bilateral talks concerning security and generally situation in the Pacific, who are the EU member states. I would like to continue this, and I open, of course, the floor for discussion. Whoever wants to put the question, please put it in chat or just give me raise hand like this. I would like to ask Masashi to answer the question Jakub put about this security architecture, because that's rightly so that we don't have the, well, we can call Quad and NATO pre-NATO, but it's still, we don't have NATO or any other alliance in the Pacific. So how would you answer to this question, Masashi?
Thank you very much for the questions. Yes, exactly that, as you pointed out, in the in Europe, in the Indo-Pacific region does not have the collective defense, the alliance like NATO. However, historically, in Asia, the hub and spoke or multi-layered security architecture has been established step by step in this region, centered by the bilateral alliance and security partnership with United States. And for Japan, in case of Japan, the US-Japan alliance is the foundation of our security and defense that we will fight together if some contingencies happen. But even if we do not fight together, it is important to share knowledge and with ASEAN countries, which are also facing Chinese maritime opportunistic expansion or aggressions, and to help them to improve their the law enforcement capacity, and other the capabilities for maritime domain awareness, as well as humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, or the anti-piracy operations. These efforts are important. And some of these countries, like the Philippines and Singapore, have the security cooperation with the United States. So in this, of course, from a little bit more broader perspective, the Australia and India, we so-called the Quad, the relationship going to be more important, not only the deals with the traditional security issues, but also does a non-traditional security cooperation. For instance, providing to the COVID-19 vaccines to ASEAN countries and other Pacific Island countries. So in this way, I believe that those ad hoc, multi-layered security cooperation architecture, I believe that the security of Asia will be enhanced by the multi-layered systems of the ad hoc security cooperation, starting with the bilateral alliance. And in addition, it states that I focused on the issue of China, but at the same time, from the Japanese, from the context of the Japanese security environment, we cannot forget the threat from North Korea. In this context, as you know, that now the current relationship between Japan and Republic of Korea has been deteriorated, unfortunately. But at the same time, we needed to compare. We need to share our perspective and the threat perceptions, and also why I emphasis on that point. If some contingencies happens, it's one of the case study of the comparison with NATO. The NATO and U.S. ROK alliance has the single integrated operational command structure, but U.S.-Japan alliance does not have it, same kind of format. So this is one of it, a huge gap and a huge differences of when some contingencies happens, and if we face that, we needed to quickly response some contingencies. So in that sense, that current structure of the surrounding the Korean Peninsula, this is one of the legacy of the Korean War in 1950s. But now the structure is drastically changed because of the situation in the North Korea. The military development, especially focused on the nuclear and missile capabilities, has grown. That it is one of the major differences comparing with the 1950s. At that time, North Korea did not have the physical strike capability against Japan. But now the situation changed. There are a lot of the ballistic missiles and the nuclear capable systems to striking Japanese soil, not only Japanese soil, but even they have some more longer range missile to threatening Guam, Hawaii, or mainland America. So in that situation, we needed to recognize that the theater of the Korean Peninsula and Japan and US continent already integrated is one of single integrated theater. So we need to redesign our security structure and the more deeper consultation mechanism, creating the more deeper consultation mechanism with 3 countries. And last, I think that the same things, some contingencies happen related on the Taiwan. So also that we mean that the US-Japan alliance doesn't have a single integrated operational command structure. And also
we could not have that regular basis, the intelligence sharing mechanism with Taiwan. But it is one of the critical gap of when some contingencies happen. So I think that we needed to start some more detailed discussion. It's a little bit harder to the government level, but in this field that the think tank community like us or more academic community to involve the track 2 or track 1.5 level meeting and discussion would be provide the good opportunity starting to the more further discussion with Taiwan. So that's my answer of your question.
Thank you, Masashi. To conclude our seminar, and definitely we'll try to continue this topic because indeed security is one of the key important topics of key importance also for us in Poland. His Excellency Akio Miyajima, Ambassador, please.
Thank you very much for today's exchanges that I myself enjoyed and learned a lot. But at the same time that I realized maybe because of it is online, well, this is just has to be considered to be the first step. And then there should be to be continued kind of good follow-up discussions. There are specific questions that need more elaborations in the answering. But it shows that, well, we have a very good, important, common challenges ahead of us. So I really do hope that we can make this kind of opportunities in the near future. And so thank you very much. And thank you very much Dr. Murano, that participating from Washington, D.C. And I'm really looking forward to see you here in Warsaw.
Great. Thank you also. Thank you, Masashi. Thank you, Jakub. Thank you, Your Excellency, and all the participants. The Center for International Relations will try to prepare a paper on this subject, and we'll continue definitely both writing and talking about that. So we'll hope to see you in September for our next event under the series of this Asia-Europe online bridges. Thanks a lot. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.